Welcome to DriveSpark. This is Bharadwaj and that is the new Pulsar P150. The Pulsar 150 range has now received a next generation update. Bajaj has given this motorcycle a huge overhaul, and in this video I will tell you everything you need to know about the changes on this motorcycle, how is it to ride, and also is it worth the 150 tag name. Let's get started. So before we talk about why the Pulsar P150, let me tell you a little bit about the pricing, variants and the color options that is available with this motorcycle. Now the prices start for this P150 at 1.17 lakh. Now that is for the single seat, single disc variant. Now what you see right here is the top end model, that's the twin disc and split seat variant. This variant is priced at around 1.2 lakh ex-showroom. Now these are ex-showroom prices. Now moving on with the color options, what you see here is a dual tone paint scheme. You get blue color option and you get 5 other options. There are 2 solid color options, but the dual tone theme has been given with the help of graphics on the motorcycle that is not present on the single tone color options. Now that is it with the pricing and the color options. Now let me talk about why the P150. So Bajaj strongly feels that the Pulsar 150cc segment, the premium commuter segment where it is positioned in, will have buyers. It had buyers from the past, but right now you can see a lot of manufacturers shying away from the 150cc and moving to a larger displacement because of the emission norms. But Pulsar strongly believes that 150cc segment will still move on, and that is the reason Bajaj is sticking with the 150cc segment, even though they offer 2 models in the 160cc segment, that's the N160 and the NS160. So this motorcycle will live on according to what Bajaj says. Now with that small brief about why the Pulsar P150, let me also tell you that the older generation Pulsar 150 motorcycles will be phased out after this motorcycle is introduced in a full-fledged manner. They will be discontinuing that Pulsar 150 in a phased out manner, starting with the South Indian market and all the way up to the North Indian market. This is the future of Pulsar 150 motorcycles, what you see right here. Now that is about where the Pulsar 150 will be headed to, but right now let us talk about the design. What you see right here is a design inspiration that has been borrowed from its elder sibling, that's the N160. It is very much evident when you see it from the headlamp itself. It gets a similar headlamp, the T-shaped with the 2 pilot lamps placed here, and now for the first time in the 150cc segment it gets a LED projector headlamp. All lighting except for the indicators are LED on it. If indicators were given as an LED unit, it would have been even great aesthetically. So moving on to the front fascia of the Pulsar P150, the features that are there in terms of design element, you get a short fly screen or windscreen right here to help with the aerodynamic ability. Also another interesting bit is that Bajaj has given a fork protector right here, fork seal protector. Now that is something that is not seen on 150cc motorcycles. Good job Bajaj right there. And you get a body colored front fender right here. This obviously is offered in a twin disc variant, so you'll be able to spot twin discs. Speaking about alloy wheels, these are 17-inch alloy wheels which are lighter than the previous generation Pulsar, and you get a funky thin spoke design to match the overall look of the motorcycle. Now let me go a little further back on the motorcycle and let me come to the tank. Now the tank is, now the overall tank displacement has been reduced from 15 liters to 14 liters. That is to keep the motorcycle light, but what Bajaj believes is now this engine has become more fuel efficient, so the overall range of the motorcycle remains unaffected. I will come to the riding bit and the mileage bit a little later in the video, but let me get back to the design. As you can see, based on the N160, it still gets tank shrouds, Pulsar badge written on it, and you can see dual tone graphics placed all around the tank, which makes it look muscular. And the rider sits very low now. The seat height is rated at 790 mm and the ground clearance is rated at 165 mm. Even though the rider sits a little high up, the seat has been sculpted so that they tuck into the motorcycle and is very easy to ride, unlike the older generation Pulsar. Also, speaking about the new generation update, it now gets the same infinity bezel-less display for the instrument cluster that is seen on the N series motorcycles. You get a semi-digital unit. The analog part is taken care by the RPM meter, whereas the digital bit includes a speedometer, gear position indicator, distance to empty, instantaneous fuel efficiency, and also average fuel efficiency, along with 2 trip meters. Now those can be controlled via 2 buttons that is mounted right below the instrument cluster. Now, this being a premium commuter, you don't get the frills of adding your bike to your smartphone via Bluetooth, all those features. If you need all those features, you will have to reach out to Bajaj's bigger displacement capacity motorcycles. Now, what one feature that I like on this motorcycles are the switchgear quality looks very good, and to add to the premiumness of it, all the switches are backlit, so it is easier to operate in low light conditions, and also it adds to the aesthetic value of the motorcycle, makes it look much more premium from where you're sitting. Now, moving on to the rear view mirrors, again, it's a very funky design, but it has a very wide profile. This will give you a very good view of the vehicles coming in the rear, and you can adjust it as per your preference very easily. This variant gets a clip-on handlebar. However, the single disc variant with the single piece seat gets a single piece handlebar, but on the top end model you get clip-on handlebars. Now, personally, I would prefer a single piece handlebar. That is how I have ridden my motorcycles over the years. Clip-on handlebars has its own pros and cons, but probably Bajaj thought that giving a clip-on would add to a more premium touch on this motorcycle. Right behind the handlebar you get a USB slot. Now this is weather protected as well, because you get a spring-loaded flap. You can charge your smartphone using that USB port and still place your phone either on the phone mount that is there on your bike, or even in your pocket as well. Now, that is about the front section of the motorcycle. Now let me come to the seats. You get a split seat right here, and also the body panels are neatly tucked next to the seat, giving it a very clean and good futuristic look. But what I think was a miss is you see an empty space right here in on this wheel, especially in this angle. That is because right now this gets a underbelly exhaust, and also it does not get any form of tire hugger as well. That has been omitted to keep the motorcycle light, is what Bajaj said. Now, the way you know that you are looking at a P150 is a badge that is present on this rear cowl right here. You get a P150 badge. And speaking about cowl, there is a cowl right below the engine. Now this, what you see, is plastic. You can see that it's very fiddly, and it is only adds to the aesthetic value. There's no functional value with that, but it certainly makes the motorcycle look a lot more aggressive. I will speak about the foot pegs and how the rider sits on the seat, and how the seat later in the video when I'm explaining how the motorcycle rides. But let us continue with the design. Coming to the rear section of the motorcycle, you get split grab rails right here. This is very Pulsar like, and this has been the design trait of the Pulsars in the past as well. More of a design inspiration from the NS series of motorcycles is what I believe. And coming to the tail lamp, you get vertical slatted tail lamp, LED tail lamps of course, and looks very clean on the motorcycle, along neatly integrated with the rear tail tidy that is present on this motorcycle. Makes it look much more cleaner and more aggressive from the rear as well. Now, there are a couple of features that I want to talk about before I move on to the mechanical bits of it. The bike comes with a sari guard. Now this grille is a little wide to my liking. Probably it could have done with a more shorter one, but this is there for functionality, and Bajaj has given that. Also, there are very few motorcycles which has underbelly exhaust, and still this motorcycle gets a center stand and also a side stand from the factory. And also P150 is one of the few motorcycles that still gets this, the kicker. So that is about the design and the features of this motorcycle. So now it is time for me to tell you how this bike rides. Let me start with the powertrain right here. Now this motorcycle gets a cradle frame with the engine as the stress member, which is very much like the one found on the N160. Engine is directly mounted onto the chassis, so the NVH levels of the engine needs to be in check, which is what Bajaj has done. Bajaj has taken the N160's engine and developed that into a 150cc engine on this motorcycle. They have used lighter components on the inside. However, they have not changed the bore and stroke that is there on the previous generation Pulsar 150. Yet they have managed to churn out healthy power figures for this motorcycle. Speaking of which, the motorcycle churns out 14.5 bhp at 8000 rpm and 13.5 newton meters of torque at 6000 rpm. It comes paired to a 5-speed gearbox, and it has a very light clutch. Now, speaking about this engine's performance, it is certainly one of the very creamier engines. It has got a lot of refinement. I agree with Bajaj when they said that they have worked on the engine refinement a lot. So the vibrations are almost cancelled out, and there is nothing being translated onto the chassis and then onto the handlebar and going onto the rider's palms. So in that way, the engine is very refined, and it is very tractable as well. I pulled in from roll-on acceleration from third gear, from 20, and even without changing gear I could able to hit 90. So that way, when you're riding this inside the city, it would not be requiring more gear changes in that manner. You can stick to one gear and keep pulling the motorcycle in that gear. Now on that note, let me talk a little bit about the handling and the ergonomics of the motorcycle. As I said earlier, the rider tucks into the motorcycle, do not sit on top of it because of a very sculpted seat. Taller riders and shorter riders will not have any problem in reaching the ground. The seat height is set, even though it has a 790 mm, the sculpted seat definitely enables, and the narrower midsection definitely enables the shorter riders to tiptoe at least, and shorter riders to manage the bike very easily at stop and go traffic. And also the foot pegs is a little bit on the rear set side, which will give you a little more better rider ergonomics. With the clip-on handlebar, or be it the single handlebar, you'll have no trouble riding this motorcycle for longer duration. Seat is also well cushioned, and it is very wide to give you a lot of space to move around the motorcycle for the rider. And also it gets a very large pillion seat as well, so two-up riding on this motorcycle will be a breeze inside the city or even on highways as well. Now let me speak about the suspension and the handling a little bit. So for suspension, you get a telescopic forks at the front and a monoshock suspension at the rear. Now the travel for the front fork is at 135 mm and the rear suspension is at 130 mm. Earlier Pulsar used to get a twin shock absorbers where the travel was limited to 105 mm. Now you get a lot more travel on the rear, which will enable for a more comfortable ride, and also the suspension is set up a little bit on the softer side, so aggressive riding around the corners with a hard downshift will certainly make the rear step out a little bit. But having said that, 110 by 80 section tire on the rear will only allow so much of cornering ability because this particular tire is set up for more comfort, and this is not sort of a motorcycle where you carve corners, but it is possible. If you are brave enough, you can push the bike around the corners. It will handle it, and it has got fabulous brakes as well. It gets a single channel ABS. Disc on the front is 260 mm rotor, and the disc on the rear is a 230 mm rotor. Now for the drum variant, you get 130 mm drums at the rear. Braking is on point. You can squeeze in the brake and the bike will respond. There's not much weight that the brake has to handle. The motorcycle is light, and that adds to the overall experience of the motorcycle. Now to sum up, the P150 can be ridden on city roads very easily with 2-up, and it can also be taken on longer journeys with 2-up. You'll have no trouble. The motorcycle is light, the engine is responsive, and engine is refined, and Bajaj claims a mileage of 49 kmpl, and that is what Bajaj is saying in a real world condition and not ARAI rated. So definitely this motorcycle can travel up to 650 kilometers before you will have to refuel this motorcycle again. Bajaj has stuck to their guts in producing 150cc motorcycles, even though their competitors have now shelved that operation. Bajaj say that 150 segment is a premium commuter segment and will always tend to cater to those buyers who aspire to own this premium segment commuter motorcycles. And on that note, I'm sure that each of you guys would had some or the other story with related to the Pulsar motorcycle, especially the 150, which was the OG of premium commuter sporty motorcycles. What is your story? I would really like to know. Mention them in the comments below. Also like and share this video, and do let us know what do you think about the Pulsar P150. This is Bharadwaj signing off for DriveSpark. Stay safe and ride safe.